On the message board, we had someone ask, is Milton better than T. Martin? Travis says, I say yes. Got that discussion. Mr. Jones saying, hopefully Milton is T. Martin and Hooker was Peyton and we win the Natty this year.
Okay, guys, no, Joe Milton is not better than T. Martin. You have to go back and look at the time period T. Martin played in where defenses were allowed to do a lot more, and T. Martin didn't play in this cutting edge of an offense. And he completed 57% of his passes, had 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions that year. In 98, he won it. And then in 99, the thing with T. Martin was there was a noticeable drop-off in how he played in 99. And guys, you had to be fair to T. Martin there, though. He had Randy Sanders as his offensive coordinator that next year. Randy Sanders is the most notorious non-developer of quarterbacks Tennessee ever had as an offensive coordinator. I mean, Casey Clausen looked worse his senior year than he did his sophomore year under Randy Sanders.
Well, that's true, but let's hash this for a second. There are similarities. They both throw I remember showing up to campus way back in 1996 to cover practice, and I saw this ball fly through the air, and I thought to myself, well, that has to be Peyton Manning. I guess it was 97. I said, well, that has to be Peyton Manning because that's one of the most beautiful passes I've ever thrown. I was walking around a corner, and then I looked back to see who threw it, and it was T. Martin. There are some similarities between T. Martin and Joe Milton in the way they throw a deep ball. And I don't hate that comparison at all.
He had way better touch on his deep ball, though. Let's be fair on that. I mean, he had a way better touch on his deep ball. I mean, we talked about that Peerless Price play yesterday. And that, the most famous play in Tennessee history, the touchdown in the national title. And yes, Peerless made the play, but T. Martin put the ball where only Peerless Price could catch it. I mean, that was a beautiful throw that he made. A little bit underthrown, but still.
Yeah, I thought it was underthrown. I thought that Peerless Price made that play. I mean, to me, Joe Milton can make that pass. I'm not arguing that as a whole T. Martin doesn't have better touch, but I think you're also discounting, with all due respect, Caleb, that Hendon Hooker developed better touch and better accuracy. So you're not going to see the Joe Milton who was really good in Clemson. You're going to see against Clemson, you're going to see a better Joe Milton coming out this fall.
True.
Does that get close to T. Martin?
If it does, it's because of who he's playing for. It's because he's playing for Josh Heupel, whereas T. Martin probably was on track to have a great senior year in 99 if David Cutcliffe stays around. David Cutcliffe leaves, Randy Sanders comes. I know Fred White sometimes suggests that T. Martin was held back because they didn't let him throw the ball as deep. They threw it deep a lot more under Randy Sanders in 99 than they did under Cutcliffe in 98. And quite honestly, Martin was not as good throwing it deep that often in 99 because they didn't mix up the offense as well. And you saw, I mean, I think you remember, he took a noticeable step back in 99 from 98.
So this is interesting. Mr. Jones says Joe Milton can have a Cam Newton top of year. Maybe that's a better comparison than T. Martin. We say T because he's Tennessee. And we see him in orange. We see Milton in orange. Cam Newton's doable. I kind of see that. And I don't mean this as an insult, but I thought T was a little bit more fluid as a runner. I don't think Cam Newton is as fluid as a runner. I don't think Joe Milton is as fluid as a runner as T. I think that's a really good comparison. Kudos to the message board and Mr. Jones. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and Cam Newton had the same accuracy issues that we're talking about with Joe, where Cam Newton had questionable deep ball accuracy. Now, it was one of those where, I mean, that's a better one. I agree. Now, here's the question. We know Josh Heupel's ahead of the curve offensively. Is Josh Heupel as ahead of the curve as Gus Malzahn was ahead of the curve when Auburn had Cam Newton in 2010? I mean, at that time, no one had figured out that offense. They figured it out about 4 years later, but no one knew how to handle Auburn's offense in 2010.
And I really like that comparison. I just see those two guys as being very, very similar, very, very insightful there. Now, the other thing that Cam had, let's remember this, is he had an offense that was ahead of the curve, right?
Right.
Tennessee has an offense that's ahead of the curve. Auburn was really talented by Auburn standards. Not as talented as probably Alabama, even though they beat them that year with the crazy play. Is Tennessee's talent level to that point would be my next question to support Milton to be a Cam Newton.
I think so. That, by the way, the year Auburn beat Alabama with the crazy play. No, that was 2013. 2010 was the they call it the comeback year, where they were down 24-0, came back.
Right.
Well,
I was referring to the crazy run down the sideline, but anyway.
Yeah, that was 20. But Cam, you're right, because that Alabama team was more talented. Auburn had Cam Newton and Nick Fairley. Those are the two main people I remember from that team. With Auburn. His most famous game is that comeback against Alabama where he was down 24-0 and led the comeback. Dave, let's be honest. You watched that game. Alabama gave that game away to Auburn. They had that. I mean, Mark Ingram fumbled when he never fumbles. I mean, Alabama did everything. That was the worst half of coaching I'd ever seen from Nick Saban.
Well, I thought he was pretty bad in the second half early in his career a lot. I thought that he sat on leads too much before he went and got Lane Kiffin. We know Josh Heupel's not going to do that.
Oh, no. Heupel's not going to sit on the lead. I don't think Josh Heupel's the type that's going to fall behind 24-0 either in a game, quite honestly. But I could be wrong on that.
Well, I mean, you would hope not. We don't want to revisit South Carolina, but there's always.
He didn't fall behind 24-0, though. Tennessee was in it with South Carolina for a while. And then until that Hooker ACL injury, I think we all thought, like, even down by 17 in the fourth quarter, like Tennessee might come back and win this.
Yep. No, I did think that they would come back and win it until the ACL injury. So there we go. Great comparison. Cam Newton to Joe Milton III, Jr., Senior, Esquire. Do we still refer to him as Joe Milton III? Is there a Joe Milton II that's somewhere getting upset that he's
when my OCD is when I write Joe Milton III and then I write Milton because it's, I don't know if you guys were taught this, Dave, but I'm like, with the name and AP style, you always give the full name and title the first time you address them. And then you can use the last name. So
Joe Milton III, Esquire.
Joe Milton III. By the way, he's not RG3, so
don't do the voice again.
No. People used to say Robert Griffin III.
Caleb and his voice.